Okay, I'll go ahead and begin. Thanks everyone for having me here. Thanks to Infomedia and also our partners Brandwatch and ZeroFox. And thank you all for sitting here as well. We did a tour of all the other rooms, so I know some of you are forcibly here because you couldn't fit in the other ones. And also, this one's probably a lot warmer than the other room. So I totally get it, but for those of you who actually want to listen to what I'm talking about, thank you. It's awesome. I'll introduce myself. I'm Tesh Patel. I do work for Hootsuite, and I'll talk a bit about why I guess it's credible for me to be talking about this subject. I've probably been in the SaaS tech space for 11 years, starting with a Facebook app developer company, and then moved into what's now the world's largest CRM system, and then 5 glorious years at Hootsuite, which is where I currently work today. And during that time, we've probably talked to about, 5,000 customers. I've always been on customer-facing role. And the good thing about that, even though I haven't been maybe on your side of the fence in terms of using technologies and tools for business impact, I've been able to talk to so many customers and understand their challenges, where they are. So when you think about 11 years ago, the storyline was, let's convince them to be on social. It's important, social's cool, it's where everything's going. And that was our talks, it was about that. Then we move forward a little bit further, and we'll say, well, let's talk about what kind of content, what's your image on social? Because they've already gone on there. And that was the whole talk line and all of that. And then now, finally, everyone's bought in, everyone's doing stuff. How are we going to measure the impact and the value that we're getting out of social? So it actually piggybacks well off of what Charlotte, for those of you who watched the previous session, what she was talking about, just a little bit more in depth. And I'll start here with this slide because this is what a lot of my customers look like when they're trying to ask for money for Hootsuite. Their CEO or their boss gives them that question. They're like, well, what's the ROI? And they get the deer in the headlights look. Actually, in a real story, one of the largest car manufacturers, who is a Hootsuite customer, their CEO, he's the type of guy that takes a helicopter to work. Took the helicopter to work, asked his CMO, did you see that new car video? We spent X and X millions of dollars on it. What was the value of it? And the CMO gave that look, the deer in the headlights look. So he's like, okay, I'll get back to you. Then he goes to his director of digital, asks the same question, got the same look. Director of digital goes to his agency, same look. Finally, they went to Hootsuite. We did give the same look first, but we did ask them, okay, it's okay, we can do this, but it'll take a little bit of time, but we can do this through some of the steps that I'll outline today. And then also, ROI obviously is a big deal, just a little fact. $50 billion have been spent in 2018 of total global ad budgets on social media. 2018 was a milestone year because it finally eclipsed print and TV. So it is a major deal, and we do need to be able to actually record the value of it. So we did a CMO survey, 2018 in October, and 20% of marketers 20% can quantitatively prove the impact of social. So I'm wondering if your marketers out there, if you agree, that's one in 5 of you are able to do that. But we are seeing this trend. Hopefully it is growing and growing to a higher number where they can start doing that, thanks to tools, technology, and people. So in the next 20 minutes or so, I'll look at the clock, we'll talk about some of the challenges of figuring out ROI. Then we'll use those challenges to redefine what ROI actually means. Instead of it being a monetary gain, we can find value in other ways. And then finally, we'll go through 4 steps of exactly how we can start to uncover, making sure that we're recording ROI correctly, using the right methodology and the right metrics. So the first one, the customer journey is not always this nice linear path. You're all customers of something. Whether if you think of a customer, if you're in a talent acquisition function, that customer is someone that wants to work at your company. If you're selling an actual product, that customer is someone that you want them to buy your product. So it's not always nice and linear because they have so many different touch points. An oversimplified version of this customer journey would be, I showed up today, I saw Charlotte's lab coat, and I was like, wow, that's a really cool lab coat. I want to wear that as well. So in that little prep room, I go onto Google and I search for a lab coat, a specific one with paint on it. And then I go to the website and I see I'm about to click purchase, but then I get distracted. I get distracted by someone sending me a WhatsApp message. So then later on, I forget about it, and I go onto Facebook, and Facebook reminds me, oh yeah, Tesh, you wanted to go buy this lab coat with paint on it. I'm like, oh, that's right. Now the time is right, and I go from my Facebook ad to purchase that lab coat. But it doesn't always work like that, of course. If it did work like that, we could build a really predictive attribution model of how best to reach our customers, but that's not always possible. Now, let's say we do have a good attribution model. Which model is correct? Marketers always struggle with attribution, whether it's first touch, last touch. It's no different on social because there are so many touch points. First touch and last touch to attribute an actual purchase or a conversion for your customer, those are the easiest. Last touch specifically for all of those who run ads on social media that actually have a conversion button or a point of sale. But multi-touch is actually where more and more people are going. Multi-touch, however, is the most difficult. It's hard because you have so many touch points, as I described earlier from that lab coat buying example. But it's also because your strategy changes, your audience changes, and then the channels in which you want to touch your consumers change all the time. Right now, we're probably focused on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, not so much for Twitter in Denmark, but those channels. But there's new channels all the time, different ways to touch your customers. So the multi-touch, yes, it makes sense because you can attribute certain levels of value to each of those touch points to get a full picture of how you're impacting that customer journey. But it changes all the time, so you need the right tools and the right resources to be able to do that. That is another challenge of measuring ROI. Thirdly, dark social. I don't know about you guys, but dark social is I'm definitely an offender of. When I see something interesting on social media, I take a screenshot on my phone and then WhatsApp it to somebody. So they literally have no idea if I ended up buying that product from that person or if my friend bought that. It just goes away because the data doesn't exist. If you pull up your iPhone and you see the share sheet, the data, instead of you clicking it or hitting the share button on that channel, it just stops right there. So there's no real way to attribute where that action occurred. So 82% actually of all social sharing is happening on dark social. If you're looking at your website analytics, that actually shows up as direct traffic, which actually it's not. And then finally, the fourth reason why ROI is hard to measure is that paid and organic have been in different parts of organizations since the beginning. So think about your roles today. I know some of you guys, but think about how you operate today. Is your paid team sitting in the same office as your organic team? Is your paid team even part of your company? It could be part of an agency or handled by someone else. So they've always kind of been traditionally siloed. And they also have different metrics that they care about. For example, the organic team, typically the teams that use Hootsuite in the very beginning of my 5 years there, they care about the top of funnel metrics. So the brand awareness, the affinity, those types of metrics, the ones that are, like likes, comments, shares, those types of things. And that's what their metrics are supposed to be. That's how they know they've done a good job. And the paid, that's a bit more easier to justify an ROI on paid. They're the lower metrics of the funnel. They're the actual conversions. You put out a Facebook ad, you collect an email address, I got a new lead, that's a conversion, we're good. I put out a Facebook ad that has install this app, that's a conversion. So theirs is much easier to measure, but the two are using completely different tools, and since the social customer journey goes from the top of the funnel all the way down, they both need to be put together, and that's a reason why it's still been really tough to track ROI between those two teams. So, the main thing we want to achieve, if there's one thing that you walk away from this 25 minutes and go back to work with, is that we want to come up with an understandable way to measure ROI. It doesn't have to be the silver bullet, and this will just fix all of your gaps within your organization. But let's start somewhere small by understanding what are the right metrics to track, and then we can go further after you test, you get more buy-in, and then we can just keep growing and growing with your ROI attribution model. So vanity metrics, as I was talking about earlier, likes, comments, shares, the lifeblood of social media channels because they came up with them and they gave that to us for free. most companies are actually moving away from that. You know, what is a like worth? What is a happy face emoticon work? Um, so they are going away from that. However, those still are impactful when you're talking about a customer journey as a whole. So if you did see Charlotte's presentation earlier, she was talking about how when we were advertising this event, organic and unpaid, for Art of Social, before you and your companies bought tickets to it, we're trying to build some awareness first, right? Awareness, if that's not happening and we can't track that by likes, comments, and shares, then we still haven't, we're still not having eyeballs on this Art of Social event. And we actually were talking about a statistic with a friend of mine earlier today. As soon as a company turns off or puts value away from those higher level vanity metrics, their search goes down. It's hand in hand. So if all of a sudden if brand awareness isn't your objective, and which is measured by vanity metrics, other things start to crumble away. So we also want to know, in terms of the awareness types of post, moving away from vanity metrics, it still is important to validate what's working with your audiences. So using brand awareness types of post does help strengthen what you should actually promote or provide budget behind. It informs what kind of content is working to the right audiences. And also, your current followers on social media, what you can do with that is use that to accelerate how you're targeting them in a paid ad. So you can create lookalike audiences from your existing follower base, and then use that to better target your audiences through paid social campaigns. The last thing I want to mention, there's a bit redundant here, and is to re-engage existing audiences. So you still, even though vanity metrics are kind of going away a bit, you still also want to use the current audiences that you have to move them further and further down the funnel. So if you see that a piece of content that you're putting out there is about some kind of subject matter, it's probably about video, because video is the end-all be-all right now. You want to also help now shift them even further and further down the marketing funnel. You want to shift it from awareness and affinity to consumption to intent, and then obviously down to conversion. So we'll redefine ROI. ROI traditionally means you're putting a monetary investment in something, and you want to get a financial return back. But that isn't always the clear case when you think about that awareness, the awareness metrics. So we want to redefine it as the sum of all social media that provides value. So if a like doesn't provide value to you, don't worry, don't keep it in your ROI model. But if 1,000 happy faces or 1,000 angry faces or 10,000 shares and 5,000 video views mean something to you, put that into an attribution model, and then that actually is causing value for you. So it's because it's beyond revenue. It doesn't have to be increasing sales. It could also be about reducing costs. So you can reduce costs through your social media strategy in a lot of different ways. You can reduce costs by creating more efficient ways to do things. So you're reporting more efficiently to certain key areas of the business. Social media typically starts out of marketing, but there's a lot of value in HR, there's a lot of value in sales, there's a lot of value in other parts of the business. And so if you have a more efficient way to provide what they're doing is proving value back to the business in the reporting sense, that's actually reducing costs because you're doing it quicker. When you're also analyzing the effectiveness of your ad campaigns or your organic strategy, you can make decisions faster, and that's actually ending up reducing costs. You can also improve customer experience. So regardless of the business you're in, you do want to talk to your customers and where they want to be talked to. So a lot of companies have their social media becoming their premier way to handle customer service. So regardless of handling customer service, you're answering their questions, of course, but you're also creating brand loyalty. You're also having them repeat purchases, and that's a ton of value. And that's not necessarily just revenue, but that's inherently valuable as well. Third one here is improving competitive positioning. So if you think about competitive positioning, let's say right now your company, you're happy doing Instagram and Facebook. Let's say your competitor is on Snapchat and your competitor is doing Instagram stories. If you're not in there, then you're not getting that value that you could be getting. So just inherently by exposing yourself to another channel in which to access customers or talk to customers, then you're getting a lot of value from there. And then finally, mitigating risk. So being able to understand any negative sentiment or any negative chatter on social channels. This actually will flow into Ricky from Brandwatch, what he's going to talk about next. That is worth something. If you're having less risk, less angry customers, less things going wrong with your website or your app or whatever it might be, then that is actually valuable to you. So we'll start building a measurement framework. There's about 4 steps to this. There's not only 4, but we're going with 4 for this 25-minute presentation. The first one is calculate your true investment in social. So any new customer that we work with, we try to talk to them about how much are you actually spending. And that goes from the very basic things like, okay, we have 1 employee, we have 1 social media manager, this is his or her salary. Okay, that's fine, that's something to take into consideration. But we also want to take into consideration how much are you spending on tools. So, okay, we spend this much on Hootsuite, we spend this much on Brandwatch, we spend this much on something else. And then finally, we also want to take into consideration what's your ad budget. So this is what we're currently spending on ads on Facebook, Instagram, and so forth. So your total end-to-end cost on social media. What are you planning to spend, or what have you been historically spending? We want to identify exactly what that is. Now, once we have those costs in there, we want to make sure that we set objectives that connect to overall business goals. And these objectives are super high level. These will be coming from the board, from this executive level, and then it'll trickle down into obviously your departments. But you want to make sure that these objectives are exactly what you want to achieve as a company. So increasing sales to X, increasing leads to something, gaining X% market share, making sure that our brand awareness increases. And those are all things that are high-level objectives in any marketing department or any other department that you have. But we want to make sure that the goals are set at that level before we tie them to social media metrics. So using those examples I just mentioned, let's say, for example, brand awareness. You want to increase brand awareness. How do we measure that using social media? The cool news is that people used to measure brand awareness when they would do print articles or billboards. They don't actually know how that worked. But now we actually do, because social media now has so many different measurements that we never had before. So brand awareness, if we want to increase it, what are the types of metrics that we use? We use reach. We can use impressions. We can use affinity. So people that are, let's say people went from being unhappy through social listening to happier in social listening. Those are things that change kind of brand health and brand awareness. And those are measurable items that we can achieve through social media. Then we look at more of the kind of the hard line metrics. So we want to increase sales. So how do you increase sales? You get leads. So we want to put out more ads that increase lead form fill outs. We want to make sure that we're touching customers at live events like this and so forth. So from those business objectives, it's important to tie in those exact social media metrics that go into those overall objectives. This isn't the third one, but we do want to track everything, and that's the only way we are able to achieve this. So using Google Analytics or Adobe Analytics, which will give you all the website data that you want, making sure that UTM parameters are used if you are using Google Analytics, which is basically making sure that everything has a tag or a campaign influence. And then also conversion pixels on Facebook, for example. If you're using Facebook ads, as soon as they go to your website and do that action or that conversion, it's all tracked. Because if you're not tracking anything, you won't necessarily be able to prove any of this ROI. There are some of it you can prove for free on the social networks, like the brand awareness, the top of funnel things, because of the likes, shares, and comments. But it is important to combine all of that as you do a full ROI report. And then step 4 is calculate the impact on the revenue and the goals. Step 4 is actually the easiest. Once you have the measurements in place and you're tying those measurements to those objectives, you need the right tools, but you are able to tie those two together. So again, I'll use the example of the Art of the Social event. We've put out organic and paid content. We've probably emailed our customers. All of that is attributed using web analytics links that go to a lead form of where you guys fill that information. And if our goal is to get however many entrants we had here, I think we had 450, we can go into Hootsuite Impact and quickly see that we've, 1, achieved the goal, 2, see which content worked the best, and then 3, if we're going to do this next year, how can we improve of what we've already done? Now, Hootsuite and our partner products aren't the end all be all by any means of how you're going to do this. And of course, you're using tons and tons of technology within the organizations that you're at today. Things like data warehouses, data lakes, Tableau. I think the next slide has all of these. But what we want to do, as you're all concerned with social media, is make it just as important as all of the other things that you're doing to sell products, to hire people, to increase brand presence, to gain market share, to change your sentiment. It's just as important on what we're doing on social as all of those other activities that you're doing off social. So why not combine that data? So what we strive to do is not changing the way that you are consuming data at an executive level to make top-line decisions for your organization. We just want to help shape that data and tell us a better story. So from all the analyzation we've done of this Art of Social event, we want to put that right alongside an organization like Infomedia in their business intelligence platform so that they have a better idea of how their customers have reacted, how they're doing with their customers, how they can improve for the next year. But then more importantly, have they actually achieved their business goals? So at the end of year, when they go to get a promotion or get a raise or hire more people or expand offices, whatever the goals are of the businesses, they can point back to this, and it's just as important as what all their other actions have been. And here's an example of some of the places we can take that data. So Microsoft and Tableau and IBM and Click being major ones that we see in this region particularly. But it can go anywhere, really. So we want to make sure that we work with you the best that makes sense for you. We'll give you all the data from all social channels, which is great, and then we make it work for yourself. So I'll leave you with this. Again, if there's one thing that you can take away from this is that start small, identify your business objectives, then identify the KPIs that match to those objectives, set up a good unit of measurement, and then take the learnings from that and then reinforce it over and over. You can start small. You can start with an event. You can start with a campaign. But then over time, you want to expand it to all of your efforts. Because then once you at least have that in place, it becomes predictable. It becomes easier the more you do it. And then you're just the expert on how to improve or start something new.